Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good day. How's everybody doing today? I hope everybody can see and hear me okay. Welcome to my Thursday live stream. And today I wanted to talk about my experience this month, my first month with the new Olympus OM-1. Uh, really, I was so excited to, when they announced the camera and everything they talked about in the launch. And I can say that for the most part, it's lived up to all of those expectations. And so I'm going to talk about some of the things I really love and what I thought they've improved and what's really helped me in my photography. And then, you know, I have to be a critic too, right? Otherwise, um, that's what we do here on YouTube as creators and users of these systems and reviewing. Now, I haven't done an official review on this camera. It's pretty rare for me to review a camera. I can't think of any reviews I've done on camera systems, but consider this sort of a excuse me. Consider this sort of a mini review of the camera, and I think the specs and features everybody's pretty familiar with, and um, everything that it can do. But that's all on paper, right? What is it like as a enthusiast and fanboy of the Olympus brand, now OM Systems? Because our expectations are very high, I think, because we've had amazing cameras, throughout the history. My favorite camera and still favorite camera that I would never trade for anything is the Olympus Pen F. Uh, but we do need to get work done too. Sometimes we want a camera that will get the job done, and the Pen F is as beautiful and as wonderful as that camera is for me. It just doesn't get the job done in a lot of cases. And the M1 Mark II, I think, really stepped the game up quite a bit. And I think the entire Mark II series from Olympus was really their halo cameras. The M5 Mark II, the M10 Mark II, the M1 Mark II, all of those are still excellent cameras today and a bargain by any standard, in my opinion. And I think they've held up really well. If they release those cameras today, um, I don't think anyone will really have any complaints, because they are still fabulous cameras. And then the M1 Mark III, I would say, was just sort of a modest upgrade. The key upgrades in the M1 Mark III were primarily the IBIS, right? The image stabilization. And I guess there was a couple other things, but that's what stands out most to me was the IBIS. Um, and then the handheld high res, a couple other fancy kind of things that they've done, which were nice, but in practice it doesn't really get the job done, so to speak, right? And I think this is where the OM1 has really made a tremendous leap from the M1 Mark III. Is now I can get kind of photography done that I really shied away from in the past. Um, specifically wildlife photography and, doing birds in flight, taking pictures and movies of my dog, running around and playing, which, for me was the whole reason I got into photography was, uh, for those of you that haven't been with me for the last 5 years, that is why I got into photography actually was, I had a couple of dogs, I've had dogs my entire adult life. And I didn't have very good pictures of my first dogs that I've had. And when I got my second dog, uh, that's when I said, I want to get into photography and really take nice pictures. And this was back in, 2012, roughly, is when I got my first digital camera and um, not first digital camera, first interchangeable lens camera. I wanted to get really into photography. And then, the rest is kind of history, right? I'm now working professionally as a photographer, doing real estate photography, commercial photography, and um, and that's where cameras then became more of a workhorse, more so than just for pleasure and enjoying. So this is where I think, just to kind of give you an idea of where I'm coming from and why I talk about, because I've gotten comments about who buys a camera to take pictures of their dogs and video, right? And I'm like, well, that's me. And if I had a family with kids and uh, events and things like that with my kids, I would definitely want a camera that will get the job done. And I think finally, with the OM-1, we now have a camera that will get the job done in a way that most people will want to use a camera. And by that, I mean everything that Olympus has stood for in the past and OM system is now carrying forward is we want a small, compact, capable camera that will get the job done. And I think that sums it up really, the new Olympus OM-1. It's finally a camera I think anyone can pick up, whether you're new to photography or an enthusiast or professional. The OM-1 is now really fleshed out a lot of the issues that we've had in the past that made Olympus not quite as competitive with other camera systems. Particularly the autofocusing has needed a lot of catch up. And a lot of the things that they've introduced over time, the computational, I don't like that term, but the computational features of the live composite, the handheld high res shot mode, the first image stabilization in body, well, whatever, they've had a lot of innovation over time, but ultimately these things were secondary to, I think, the purpose of why people buy cameras to begin with, is they want to capture moments in their life, the best memories, and um, they want to, maybe they get into uh, you know outdoor photography, that more artsy type things. I mean, whatever they wanted to do, and whatever you want to do in photography, Olympus has always been there and on the bleeding edge, I think, in terms of features and things that can be in the camera. And but it's always been held back by something, right? Either it's just perception or it's real. Real problems in the past have always been, I think, the autofocus, right? Because it was contrast detect a long time until the M1 Mark II. Well, the M1 Mark I had it, but uh, now it's really good. The face detect was never great. It improved a lot with the M1 Mark III, but now the face detect, the eye detect is incredible. The subject detect with the new OM system is incredible. And by getting the job done, meaning I am now doing and really enjoying wildlife photography, particularly taking pictures of birds and birds in flight. It's something I've always avoided or never really had a lot of success with. And if I got lucky in the past of catching a bird in flight or catching a bird in a tree, and being able to focus on it, great. And I was really happy with that. But now it's like I have no problems. My hit rate is so good now. And it can only really be appreciated by someone that was never good at it to begin with. Because I'm sure there's plenty of uh, bird photographers out there and wildlife photographers that always got great results, regardless of the camera system. They could probably, use a film camera and still get great shots as they have in the past. But because their skill set's very high. But now the new OM-1 is doing so much of the heavy lifting in the autofocus area with the subject detect that even amateurs like me, when it comes to wildlife photography and birds in flight, can take a decent picture or a fun picture at least. And and that's where I feel like I've really really have gotten the most out of this camera over my previous, and I've owned a lot of them, right? The M1 Mark III, the Mark II, the M5s, Mark II and 3, the M10s. I only stayed with the Mark II because I didn't think that 3 and 4 really added anything. But uh, this is where my first month with the OM Systems OM-1 has been incredible. And it's inspired me to go out and just shoot birds in flight now, wildlife photography, to a level that I was never capable of before. So for me, that's where my first month has been. It's really opened my photography up to things that I've never done before. And I know Olympus has always pushed this sports wildlife type thing, and it's always had its critics though, right? Whether it was the autofocusing system, which was definitely an issue compared to other systems, or the low light capability, because a lot of times, particularly with birds in flight, you need to have a very high shutter speed, which forces your ISO up, which forces, uh, lower quality images by default, because, it's just the nature of how the electronics work. But now that is not as much of an issue as it used to be, particularly with all of the AI type software for noise reduction and cleaning up and bringing back details that just weren't possible before. And it has to be done in the computer. The straight out of camera images, the image quality, I would say, just in general, hasn't really changed much since the Mark II series. There's certainly improvements, with the new sensor where you're shooting at higher ISOs and you can push and pull and get better colors, more accurate colors, and overall a better image. But that's not where most people are. They're not shooting at 25,000 ISO every day, and while that's great and will maybe uh, help people that do need to shoot in those kinds of ISOs, it's really at the lower ISOs, 6400 and under, 1600 and under, that I would struggle to see any difference in the last 5 or 6 years in almost any camera system, regardless of full frame, you know, APS-C, whatever. There really hasn't been much change because ultimately the technology is the same. And yeah, there's minor improvements, sure, in the sensor tech and in the processing of the analog data from the sensor to digital. Uh, but that's all under the hood, right? I mean, I would love to see someone take like an old E500 or a camera from like 10 years ago, put that same sensor into the current camera electronics and see how much better the image quality is. Because like I said, the technology hasn't changed. It's been CMOS for forever, and before that is what, the other sensor tech that we've transition the starts with a CCD, CCD tech, right? Which had its benefits, but mostly limitations. Uh, because of cost was what I understand is cost is what kind of held the CCD back from being mainstream. They're much more expensive to produce than a CMOS sensor, and now CMOS sensor is pretty much caught up because initially the CCDs were providing better image quality in technique on paper, right? But yeah, so the OM-1, that is the main thing, is that I pick up this camera and I have a very high level of confidence that I'm going to get done what I set out to do. I'm not going to come home and say, man, if I missed that shot, I never feel like I'm going to miss a shot with this camera. And I'm going to produce more videos in the future about how to sort of optimize some of the limitations within the system, because there are some certain limitations that let me talk about now, because uh, these are things that people are still very critical of And it's not the autofocus anymore, in my opinion. If anyone is critical of the autofocus at this point with the system that's in it now, I would argue that a lot of that is their own personal skill set with a camera and using a camera more so than it is the camera itself. Because if you can't get a shot in focus with this camera now, you need to work on your skill set. And I don't mean to offend anyone, but there's photographers out there that can get a sharp image with a manual focus lens, and this camera now is at a level that I never feel like I'm going to miss a shot. So let me talk about some of the limitations for I think what the target audience was for this camera and what I'm finding in the field as well. And when it comes to sports action wildlife, and I just did this video on, the buffer and shutter priority, not shutter priority. I'm sorry. The the buffering and the frame rates that you get out of this camera, and this is really what I'm hearing. This is true for many camera systems. Is they'll put down 20 frames per second, but in real life, what do you actually capture? And this is an area that a lot of people, I've not been able to find a true review of this kind of photography, with the exception of, if you guys, there's one guy that used to do a pretty good job. Why does his name escape me? It's my memory. It's not because he's a much more important person than me. Well, it'll come to me. But yeah, there's a 93 that basically it captures about 93 frames into a buffer in the camera, meaning when you push the shutter button, it'll be able to virtually instantaneously save up to 93 images for you. Now you divide that out by the frame rate that the camera is capable of, will determine how long you can hold the shutter button down before it starts to slow down. And the buffer, there's two problems. One is the buffer, like I said, is limited to 93 frames. And when you come out with a camera that can do 120 frames per second, you're going to get less than a second worth of action when you push the shutter button down. And at that point, you're fully dependent on the memory cards and how fast the memory cards are. And that's probably the biggest limitation to this camera is the buffer size and the memory card choice that they went with. I think in the Mark II version of this camera, that's where we're going to see a change, is in the SD card slots. They're going to have to switch to CFF Express type technology, so that finally the memory cards will be able to keep up with what this camera is capable of. You could argue they could have put a bigger buffer in, but how big a buffer do you need, right? I mean, do you want a 100 frame buffer, 200 frame, 1,000 frame buffer? I mean, you have to draw the line somewhere and compensate for that. So Mark II, I predict, CFF Express cards. And then there's really nothing holding you back in this camera. So that said, we have to work within the limitations, right? And I'll do some videos on that, of how to optimize that buffer to the kind of shooting that you're going to do. Because most of us shoot, we do 2-3 second bursts for sports and action, wildlife type things, maybe 5 seconds, 10 seconds is a stretch. If something's going on for 10 seconds, at that point, it's basically a story. It's no longer a capture the moment thing. So you can't optimize it. And I think for most shooting, a 93 frame buffer is fine. But there's this juxtaposition of this 120 frame per second, 50 frame per second capability with the limitations in the storage system in the camera, the memory cards. So I tried to do some analysis. I don't want to get into all this analysis, but I tried to do some analysis of how fast is uh, the camera writing images to the memory cards. And you can see my last video on what, in terms of how many images captured and what the frame rate is after the buffer's full, etc. But generally speaking, UHS-2 ain't going to cut it. It effectively writes, and I'm sorry to get into numbers for people that aren't into math, but it effectively writes what I found at about 100 megabits per second, or yeah, 100 megabits per second to the memory card with a UHS-2. And it's writing effectively at about 40 megabits per second to a UHS-1. And that slows your shutter speed down to whatever those memory cards are capable of. Yeah, you put a UHS-2 and it's rated for 250, 300 megabits. But in practice, how quickly can the camera write to that? And that's what I'm getting. And so we have to make improvements on two fronts, right? We have to improve the processing speed so it can write to the memory cards faster. And we have to improve the memory card capability as well with CF Express. And that's what they need to do with the Mark II. And that's my only critique is really they should have put CF Express cards in this camera so that the buffering is able to keep up. The memory cards are able to keep up with the camera's actual capabilities. So in like I said, in practice, in real life, it's not as much of a hindrance as it sounds, because like I said, you're doing 2-3 second bursts, and you can certainly do 50 frames per second at 2-3 second bursts. Whether or not you can maintain autofocus at that level is another story. But for all intents and purposes, this is the camera that gets it done now. And with the build quality, the weather sealing, and all of that has been proven in past camera models that the Mark III, Mark IIs have always been very robust. It's the camera you can take with you anywhere in virtually any kind of conditions. And now you can finally get the job done with a very high level of confidence when maybe your skill set's not quite where it needs to be. The camera will take over and do a lot of the heavy lifting. And that's what I would say is my first month with the camera has been really amazing. And I haven't even picked up another camera in a month. This is all I've been shooting with. And it's been an amazing experience, and it's inspired me to invest more money into the system than I have ever before. Because I've always been reluctant to buy the high end glass, all the pro lenses and stuff. Because I always felt like I was getting good enough image quality, and even if I was able to capture a great moment, having a better lens would help with that. But I didn't have that level of confidence before that I would be able to capture that image, and buying expensive glass would have really been wasted on me, right? Because my skill set for sports action wildlife has never been that strong. But now the camera's basically taken over. My hit rate is 90+% easily. And I know photographers, they use zone focusing and all of that stuff that the sports action wildlife hardcore guys do just fine with a Mark III or any other camera system. But this is the only camera that I've ever used that has brought my level of confidence of getting that shot, that moment, capturing that moment because of the high speed processing and shutter frame rates that this thing can capture. Has given me that confidence to say, okay, now is the time that I think I really want to get the best image I can out of the camera, and I'm going to buy some pro lenses now. And I never considered it before, because I always felt like the lenses I had were good enough for the kind of photography I was capable of, and this camera is just taking that limitation away to now investing more into the system makes more sense to me now. Now I always use kit lenses. This my 75 to 300, my and my regular primes, the 1.8s. Those are probably never going to go away, right? I'm always going to use my 1.8 primes, excellent lenses. But I've recently invested in the 300 f4, and that I was able to move some money around, meaning between credit cards, not like in real money, but and make that happen. So that should be coming in today, I hope, probably tomorrow. They say I'm supposed to get it today. But that is a halo lens that I just have always wanted, but could not justify buying with the kind of skill set that I had and the images that I captured. Because this 75 to 300, I am now capturing images with this lens that I've never been able to do before, and it's solely because of the OM1. Solely because of this. Sure, if I increase my skill set, like the guy Maskew Gasquet, he does I forget the name of his channel, but he was always getting 90% hit rate with his birds in flight, with the M1 Mark II, the Mark III, whatever, maybe 85%, and he would get closer to a little better than 90% with other camera systems. But this, my hit rate was like 50% or less, probably a lot less if I really want to be honest. But now, even with this lens, I was like, oh my goodness, look, I just can't believe. And they're not epic images, they're some of them are pretty okay. Uh, but wow. And I hate to use the term wow because I think that's been kind of tempered a little bit with this camera because they just put it out there, wow, and they went with it. But for me, it's like, wow, look at, I can't believe what I can do now with this camera, the kind of photography I'm capable of doing. And it's not me. It's not me at all. Like I caught this amazing shot of an eagle grabbing a fish or uh, flying around. Just amazing. And I was so happy now to be able to get these kind of images and be able to have the camera just take care of the focusing for me. Then now I feel like I can take my photography to the next level. Something that I've always felt, maybe I've kind of peaked. This is it for me. Yeah, give me a $10,000 camera. It's not going to make me take better pictures. I was like, this is it for me. But now I don't feel that way anymore. I feel like I'm just getting started again. Like I'm new to photography all over again. I have a whole genre that I can focus on and get better at and maybe produce some amazing images that I've never been able to do before. So I'm so happy and excited about that, and that's why I love this camera. Um, and for me, that's I mean I don't want to sound I don't know what the word is, but it's just like starting all over again in photography with this camera. Uh, a lot of people they like sort of the to me are the more superficial things. The higher EVF resolution. Yeah, it's wonderful, and for video work, I really underestimated how much difference that makes having this high resolution EVF. Uh, when I first got the camera, but now that I've been using it a while, and then if I put the M1 Mark III up to my eye, it's like night and day. It's hard to go back, right? When you start to experience a certain level of quality, it's hard to go back. And the M1 Mark III, I'm not going to miss a tiny bit. I I'm looking to sell that thing now. as soon as I can. I just need to do a little bit more testing and comparisons for people that are interested in upgrading to the OM1, because there's a lot of people this camera makes no sense for, right? There's no reason to upgrade even from an EM10 Mark II to this camera because of the kind of photography that you're doing. It just doesn't make any sense. I would argue EM10 Mark II can do 99% of what this camera can do for lots of kinds of photography. But it's really when you need to make a camera that can do everything and get the job done in just about anything you want to try to do with it, this is where the OM1 comes into play and has just made a big difference for me. So those are my thoughts and impressions of the camera, and a couple other things I've run into personally, and I'll talk about a couple of things I've heard about. Is the camera locked up on me one time, where I still had the screen, but none of the buttons were responsive. I couldn't take a picture. I couldn't go back in and out of the menu. It's just kind of stuck. Even though the sensor was still panning around and showing me what it was seeing, it was just unresponsive. That happened one time, and I've probably got 50,000 images, silent shutter on this camera now. And then another thing is time to time, the camera will just be sitting on my desk, right? And it should be completely silent and not doing anything, but I can hear the IBIS running, like a little bit of a hissing sound, which is odd. So I don't know what it's doing. If there's maybe there's some, like your computer, right? It's always doing things in the background. Maybe it's doing something, but I don't think that's intentional. If I put a camera down on my table, it should be just silent, right? But time to time I'll hear things. Those are the only kind of two weird things that have happened to me. As far as things I've heard about, I've seen people have problems with the single point autofocus would start to drift, right? Like it would work fine for 5-10 minutes, and then when they try to get single point focus, it's out of focus. And I've heard a few people, through the forums have that issue. It hasn't happened to me, and anyone I know that has the camera personally, meaning my peers on YouTube, Peter and Jimmy, and I haven't heard any kind of issues. And one other issue I had was this camera has the Bluetooth capability to offload GPS information from your phone while you're taking pictures, actively loading GPS information into the camera. Is the impression I got from when I read the instructions and things, but I couldn't get that to work. So hopefully these are like just firmware issues that can be fixed. Something that there's not something wrong with the design, like it's not a design flaw, but it's just a software issue that can be fixed in firmware. In particular with the issues that I've had, the autofocusing issues, I don't know. That might be something physically wrong with whoever, cameras they got. But these are very, very minor. Every camera, well, not every camera, but I've heard about issues with people in other camera systems having similar kind of issues with a new release, right? The camera just came out and it's like, oh, this camera just froze up on me. I remember watching videos, of pre-release cameras that happens. But like I said, it's only happened to me one time where it froze up on me, and I can't remember.
Something I found on the internet.
Oh, Alexa.
1 multiplied by 1 equals
Alexa, stop. I should have never put an Alexa thing in my office here, because it'll just start talking to me randomly. I don't know what I say, but it just hears me ask it something. But okay, let me stop talking for just a minute, gather my thoughts, and I'm going to look at the chat here. Okay. Let me scroll up. I see, wow, a lot of people here. That's awesome. David, good to see you. Marco, wow, you've been right on time lately. And Lasse, Caitlin, always good to see you. Christine, Plato, of course. Barry Manis, good morning. Wow, from Florida. God, I'm so jealous. I definitely want to move south eventually, further south and a little bit west, but not so far away from the ocean that I can't just do a day trip, but not so close that I have to worry about hurricanes and bad weather. Emil is here. Buenos Aires. Steve Kunder, good to see you. And I should have checked the chat sooner just in case there were any issues, because maybe I've been talking for the last 20 minutes without, well, what time is it? Wow, I've been talking for 40 minutes straight. No wonder my mouth is dry. Peter Cardo, good to see you. It's been a while. John Yutze, good to see you. Michael Pallet, good afternoon. And Andreas and Tanvan and David Tellett, Terry Noon. Wow, lots of people. So Roberto, Marcia, my goodness. Hi. And let me see. Let me check the stream here. Megabytes, not megabits. Thank you, Marco. And UHS-3 may be an option as well. When I was talking about memory cards, I haven't seen too much application for UHS-3 yet. I mean, I've heard about it, and it's supposed to be up there, but we'll see. CF Express, UHS-3, whatever is going to get the card to write faster, because going back to how quickly the camera writes to the memory cards, especially with JPEGs, it slows down when you start shooting at higher ISOs or maybe applying art filters, whatever. When you start doing more in-camera processing with the JPEGs, that also slows the camera down and significantly. So that's going to be in another video. I have to do more testing so I can kind of quantify those numbers a little better. How to get the best frame rate out of the camera, because my initial testing was really just a brute force type testing methodology. But now that I have sort of a baseline, I need to start adding the variables that can come into play, like shooting at higher ISO or applying different settings to the JPEGs or RAWs for that matter, because your raw images actually have a small JPEG in them. And those are the thumbnails you see usually initially in the files. When you open up a raw image, you see a monochrome image in a raw file, but then you process it and you can get the color back, right? So there's lots of nuances and fine tuning that can be done, and that's an area that I like to try to deal with, just so people can get more out of their cameras. Not that it ultimately really matters for the camera itself, but in the buying decision process, I should say, because I'm not really good at helping people with their buying decisions, like what camera should they buy, what would I recommend to them. I can't do that, because I love Olympus, and all the reasons I love Olympus or OM systems, there's my reasons are very specific to me and not to someone else. If somebody just wants to know, and this is a problem with a lot of reviews online, they're very technically orientated, what's on paper, what can be done to help you make that buying decision. My purpose online in YouTube is to help you get the most out of your camera once you've bought it. So if you've bought an OM Systems or Olympus camera, I want you to get the most out of it and enjoy it. and not let it collect dust, because every camera is capable of taking amazing images regardless of system or brand. But who's going to show you how to do it and get the most out of it? There's not enough of that online, in my opinion. Um, there's plenty of tutorials on how to take, specific types of genres, portrait, wildlife, landscape, and they give you general settings, uh, which is certainly, very important to the photography community. I can't thank a lot of the creators online that have helped me in my photography. And I'll go back as far as Tony Northrup helped me get started. Frono's Photo helped me get started. Matt Granger, back when I was shooting a lot of Nikon. And then uh, more recently, um, more more general type photography like Thomas Heaton and the Photographic Eye. There's a lot of channels out there that have a little bit broader perspective. But my purpose really is to fill that gap of getting the most out of the camera and showing you how to use it, right? Okay. Um, Sextus Beckenser says, your enthusiasm for the OM-1 is infectious. I'm not going to start to save up for one. Definitely. I mean, you won't have any regrets if you have any other Olympus system camera and you buy the OM-1. You won't have any regrets. If you're already in the OM system Olympus family, you won't have any regrets. And Terry Noon says, don't forget your followers who aren't interested in making the switch to OM-1. Definitely not. uh, I think a lot of I'll still keep, I'm not going to have the M1 Mark III anymore or for long. That's my plan. I might end up keeping it. I can't get much for it anymore, surprisingly. But I'll always have my EM5 Mark III, my EM5 Mark II. These are core quality cameras that, the feature set is pretty much there uh, in terms of doing my tutorials and improving how to use those kind of cameras, which I do need to do more of. I have a video for the M5 Mark III that I want to do to help people get, with their settings and custom settings that I want to do. So I'm not going to forget about, the previous camera systems. Definitely, I definitely have things lined up for those camera systems as well. But certainly the OM-1 right now, there's a lot of momentum online in terms of YouTube for this camera. So I'm just kind of riding on the coattails of that. To not for that, but mostly because I'm very excited about this camera. But definitely what's driving the direction of my videos now is that momentum with this camera system. So in the immediate future, it's going to be mostly OM1 type material and getting the most out of this because that's where the momentum is. But there's definitely plans for all of the Olympus system cameras before OM systems took over to help people still get the most out of those systems because they're still amazing cameras. Like I said, the M10 Mark II, I'm using it right now for and I have been for a while now. This is my streaming camera for video. And yeah, once in a while, unlike when I was using the EM1 Mark II, which finally I sold to one of my viewers here. Now, I hope you're getting good use out of that. Once in a blue moon, it'll lose focus. Like if I do this, if I hide my face, the face detect, and it doesn't snap back to me quite as quickly. But this camera is what, 6 years old, 7 years old now, and it's still producing amazing video and image quality that rivals, any camera out there, in my opinion. And let's see. Okay, so this is a good time to open up for questions. If you have any questions about the system, Hopefully I'll be able to answer them. I'm still getting acquainted with it, but if you have any questions, we'll just make this an open Q&A. But let me try and address some of the things I've seen here. And this is something I need to thank. Oh my God, is it Bill? One of my viewers that's local to me. Oh, I'm so sorry. I can't remember exactly. David, help me out here. Can you put in a chat section the viewer that let me borrow, or let us borrow, I should say, his EM1X and 300 millimeter Pro? Bill, thank you. Bill Millhauser, thank you so much for loaning us that EM1X, your EM1X and 300 millimeter f4 Pro, along with the 1.4 and 2X teleconverters. That really opened my eyes to what having a pro lens can do. And I can really appreciate now more, because I've never looked at the M1X for myself, because I always thought it was too big. But using it in the field, and I think David Crooks, who's also has it on loan, may disagree with me. I didn't feel it was so big when I was using it in the field. It felt just fine, even with that extra grip. And together with the 300 millimeter f4 Pro, it was a very smooth experience, just buttery. I mean, I was really impressed with that camera, and and just the feel of using it in the field. It really felt as smooth as the best way I can describe it. It didn't feel clunky or awkward at all. It just felt very comfortable and very fluid. Taking pictures with it, firing off images in high speed mode, and the final results and the images that I got, I got an amazing eagle shot with that camera. Let me see if I can pull that up. Let's see. I think it's, yeah, this one. Was this the, yeah, EM1X with the 300 f4 Pro without the teleconverter. But I it's things like this, that the shots like this that sell cameras, right? Because people look at that and they're like, wow, man, that's what I want to do, right? But let me tell you something. So the M1X, I can appreciate now why people that buy that camera really love it, and have no regrets about owning that system, and really may not even consider an OM-1 system, because the autofocus is pretty good. Now, I didn't have a very good success rate with the autofocus on that system, and that's primarily due to my inability to make the settings correct. I don't think I set up everything correctly, because I got this amazing shot of this eagle, right? But every shot after this one was blurry. And I'm not going to blame the camera for that, because I probably didn't have something set right. I mean, I know I had the bird detect on, but I don't know. I just, every shot after this one was blurry, out of focus. But that was the money shot. And it's hard to see maybe online, but there's little drops of water all around this eagle, and some of them are blood red because there's blood in the drops. So that was a shot. This one I took with the OM-1. That's the OM-1. But anyway, you can go to my Flickr page and pixel peep these all you want. These are all very processed. Like these are sky replacement images. This shot was very popular. This one I took, what did I use here? The OM-1. And this is what I mean about the OM-1. I was never able to get shots like this consistently with my EM1 Mark III. And yeah, the zone focus, continuous autofocus is fine on the EM1 Mark III. It does a great job, but my skill set is not quite good to where I could get like a 90+% hit rate. But with this OM-1 system camera, I had no problems. I got like 100 shots in a row like this. And all I had to do was pick the one that had the best lighting, the best wingspan. I just had to kind of pick from like 100 different images that were in focus. And that's why I was like, wow, look at what I can do, you know. It's not me, it's the camera. So that was that. And let's see. But so thank you, Bill. It was a great experience and really helped me make the leap to getting a 300 f4 Pro finally into my bag. Hopefully, like I said, it'll come today, but we'll see. And I'll talk about that. But that's not to say I don't get great images with the 75 to 300. This is pretty close depending on the situation. And I also did a lot of testing with the 100 to 400, and it's sharper than this lens. But I'd say if you have this lens already, it's a tough call for me to recommend getting the 100 to 400 because it's so much larger. And the image quality, yeah, it's definitely sharper. But I would just step up to a 300 f4 Pro. I mean, if you want a little bit sharper image and reach, the 100 400 is definitely the answer. That's not going to break the bank. But anyhow, that it's money no object. People buy all pro glass, right? But we have to kind of balance our budget. How much do we want to spend on our hobby, right? And the 100 to 400, I think, would make a great choice. If you don't have this lens yet, I would get the 100 to 400. If you don't have this one, if you have this already, it's a tough call. It's a tough call for me. But okay. But like I said, I'm not good at making recommendations on buying decisions. It's I think it's a much more personal, subjective choice than going through specs and images and saying this, that, and the other thing. Because what I can do with a lens is very different than what you guys could do with a lens. And David Crooks has gotten amazing images. I mean, fabulous images from his 100 400 that I guarantee he wouldn't be able to do with this lens. But that's because he's had it for a while and he's using it and it's getting good results from it. My goal is to show you how to get the best you can out of this lens and maybe the 300 f4, but that lens makes it easy to get good images. So yeah, I really like the M1X. It didn't feel bulky to me or heavy or any. I didn't really have any downside to using that camera. It's very fluid. I don't know what it was about the button placements or just the buttons are more spread out and it fit my hands really well. But I really appreciate now why people like that camera. People that like the camera, why they like it. Because there's going to be people never going to want a camera like that. Like me, I'll never buy that camera because it is a bigger camera. Even though when I was in the field, I didn't really feel it, and I really enjoyed my time with it. I think if I actually owned it for any length of time, the size would be a little bit prohibitive. Putting it in my bag because yeah, you're going to need a bigger bag. You're going to need you're just going to have to get used to just carrying a larger system in general. All right, let me see if I missed any questions real quick. Where's my chat window? Yeah, the dual processor makes everything feel fast and responsive. Definitely that. Yeah, the responsiveness and the controls and everything were just, like I said, very smooth. Yeah, lots of good comments here in the chat about the M1X. Definitely. I agree with everything. How is the learning curve on the OM Mark III? If you're talking about the EM1 Mark III, uh, it's no more difficult than any other Olympus camera. Uh, I think, you know, it really depends on finding a person that you connect with in terms of their teaching style, right? And that's what's beautiful about this community is we have a lot of great people online like Peter and Robin and Jimmy. And now, if you're into astrophotography, we have Ben over at the Narrowband channel. Uh, there's a lot of great, and myself, right? We have a lot of great, and we all have our own voice and a different way of showing you how to use the camera system and the features and things that it's capable of. So what I recommend is if you're looking for learning how to use the camera for very specific features, just do a search and look at the channels, the visionaries and ambassadors, because OM Systems has a really great channel too now, uh, and see which one you feel like gave you the information and presented in a way that you're able to understand and follow and get the most out of the camera and learn how to use it. So learning curve is very subjective, right? How hard is it to learn a camera system? And honestly, any camera system, they're all the same with respect to how difficult it to learn. It's not how difficult is it to learn. It's the question of can you find someone that can teach you, right, how to use it in a way that makes sense and you understand it. Uh, so hopefully, someone will be able to connect with you, because think about it. If you have 20 different instructors teaching across various different camera brands, and let's say you're watching an instructor for Nikon, and the way he's teaching and showing you how to use the camera makes perfect sense to you, and you're like, man, Nikon is so easy to learn, right? But that's not because of the camera so much as it is the instructor and the support that you're getting with the Nikon camera system. And like I said, I learned a lot early on from like Matt Granger, the Nikon guy, Fronos Photo, because I found them kind of entertaining and fun to watch, and I learned a lot. And I was able to connect and get into Nikon at the time when I was early on. So that's why you hear, in my opinion, all these different instructors or all these different channels online or in books. If you buy books, if you like to do it with a manual, uh, you just hear all these different opinions about, man, this system is difficult, this system is easy, etc. And to me, it's more about the instructor and who's teaching it that makes it easy, that makes the system easy to learn and the learning curve much shorter. So it's going to take some time. I wish there was uh, a way to index and rank instructors for different camera systems. But ultimately, you have to find someone that has a voice that connects with you, right, and makes sense and can show you how to use the camera system. Because a lot of times, sometimes people used to ask me, "What camera should I buy?" And I remember my advice used to be, "Well, what do your friends use that are good with the camera?" And she would say, "Well, my friend uses a Canon and she takes great pictures and stuff. And I was thinking about getting a Canon." And I would say, then get the Canon because now you have somebody that can show you how to use the camera, right? Uh, and will be patient with you, assuming they're a good friend, can be patient with you and show you how to do things and take the kind of pictures that you want to take. Because that to me is more important, is learning how to use your camera regardless of the brand and having access to somebody that can help you use the camera. So if you have a lot of friends that use Nikon or Canon or Olympus, whatever camera system that you're good friends with and you respect and think they take good pictures and you think they can help you, that's probably the camera system you should buy if this is your very first camera. But that's not really your question, right? Your question is, how hard is it to learn the OM Mark III or EM1 Mark III? And that's my answer. It's not hard at all from my perspective because I understand it, and now everything kind of makes sense. I have some, I do have my complaints about some of the organization time to time, but these are just minor to me, right? They're not deal breakers. So that is my answer. The learning curve with respect to how, the number of features available in the camera is pretty steep to get through all of the different features and learning how to get the best out of them. Because a lot of times these high-end features like live comp, high res, focus stacking, all of these things require a very specific skill set to get good at it. And in that sense, the learning curve is pretty steep if you want to take advantage of all of the features that the camera has to offer. And again, that's where you have to find someone either or someone online that you connect with and can teach you how to use those systems. And I'll always do my best. But my voice doesn't connect with everyone. Believe me, I've been called a lot of things online. But the most common theme that I hear about my videos is I'm too slow and boring and yada yada, right? Which that's fine, right? I'm not going to connect with everyone then because I get a lot of compliments about how I'm very methodical and patient and take my time to explain everything and not skip steps, etc. And some people really appreciate that and really want someone to teach them that way. But not necessarily everyone wants to learn at that pace. They just, they have a different, they connect, their brains connect things together differently, and they don't need to go through every single step. They can just go, let's just do these 5 things. I don't need to do 10 things, right, to get what I want done. and I'm doing this because this is how our brains work, right? Is some people don't need these 5 things. They can work with these 5 things and fill in the gaps. But some people, you need to fill in all the gaps to make things work together. Okay. I'm going to scroll up and make sure. See if I can get to. I need to write down what time I took a question so I can go back to that time slot very quickly. Okay, so I remember reading that. Okay, so 10:50 a.m. What time is it now? So 17 minutes behind. So 10:50 a.m. And Steve says, just got my OM-1 yesterday. Congratulations. It is enough different than the M1 Mark II. What is the best way to learn how to best set it up? I'm going to, there's a couple of videos. One of my guests, Emily Talpin, just did a video on the OM-1 and how to set it up. You can watch hers. She did a good job. She's very slow and methodical like I am in that sense. And I know Peter has done a best settings video as well. Peter Forsgaard. So those are the 2 channels that I've seen and can recommend at this point to help you get started with learning how to set it up. I haven't done my video yet. on best settings and how I set up the camera. Because I'm just still getting into the nitty. I just deep dived already into some of the features and capabilities. Um, but I'll come up with a video of my own, how I set up the camera, and because I just need some more field time, right? And once I get some more field time with the camera, then I feel like I can make a video about the best way to set it up. Because I'm still fumbling through it time to time. Like, they have, for example, today, right? Live comp. It hasn't moved from, it should, it's, the way they set up the menu now, it should be under computational photography. And one of the line items are, but you can't access it from that menu like you can the high res shot and live ND and all that. You have to go to bulb mode on the camera to still get to the live composite. And to me, live comp is more of a computational feature than it is a bulb mode feature. So my brain just didn't connect properly in that sense. Uh, so what I have to do, so that's what I mean by I need a little more field time so that I can articulate why things are the way they are in the camera, and be able to explain in a way that you'll be able to follow along and say, okay, it makes sense why that's there. It makes sense that they group these things together. So if I want to accomplish this one particular task, I need to go into this particular menu, but I also need to think about the settings in the other menu that might affect what I'm doing over here. And to be able to present that in a way that these two things connect and make sense so that you don't forget and get frustrated. Fortunately, the new OM system camera tells you a little bit about why something's grayed out and not working, but that's only one piece, right? You have to know why. Why can't I use uh, what's like I ran into this frame per second priority versus image stabilization. Why can't I use image stabilization priority with certain modes on the camera? It's grayed out, and the only message you get is that it's because you're in the wrong shutter mode, and it's like, well, how come I can't use image stabilization priority with SH2 or SH1? Why is it disabled? So when I do a tutorial or video about using the OM system camera, these are the kind of things I think about so that I can try to explain it so that it makes sense why these things, so that when you go in and you want to try something new, because I can't possibly cover every scenario or photographic situation you'll be in, but I want to be able to give you the tools and understanding of how to solve problems that you might run into when you're in the field, so that when you start setting up your camera and learning to use it and start taking pictures, um, you're not just trying to memorize by rote memory where things are in the camera. You approach the camera in a logical way and say, okay, I'm going to now take pictures of birds in flight. So I want to have a high shutter speed, but which shutter mode should I pick? Which one's going to give me the results that I want? Etc. So uh, I'll get there. I'll get there eventually. It's coming. But I need more field time. But in the meantime, I think definitely Peter and Emily Talpin, who was my guest last week, did videos on setting up the camera. Okay. Okay, CNH is asking, will Pro Capture work with the phone app? I don't think so. But honestly, I haven't tried it. Let's see how quickly I can get into the app. I have to take it out of airplane mode. Okay. So now that we're out of airplane mode, is there anything else I need to see? Bluetooth is running. Wireless shutter setting. Okay, camera's connected. I like it because the camera connects automatically. So remote control. It automatically found the camera. Connect to the Wi-Fi. Select the camera Wi-Fi SSID. Okay. So it's telling me I need to connect to the camera. So it's going to find it. There it is. And now I should be able to go back. And let's see. Sorry it's sideways for you guys. Let me see. There's SAF. I don't see. And the question was specifically Pro Capture. So I don't see any option here. I have mechanical shutter, silent shutter, continuous shutter, and silent continuous shutter, self timer. And then what is this? What is this? This must be bulb mode or something, or self timer. Yeah, that's just a self timer. So the answer is no. I don't think so. Let's see if there's anything in here. If I go to shutter priority, do I have any other shutter options? No. Okay. So yeah, unfortunately not. What were your settings for the last eagle shot? I was using subject detect bird detection, and I was using sequential shutter, silent sequential shutter. I wasn't using Pro Capture or anything, and 20 frames per second. But I think I dialed it down to 10 frames per second um, with image stabilization on, and I was shooting in manual mode, so I could control the shutter speed. So I can just walk you through it real quick. Oh, let's see. I don't think that's the right screen. No. All right. So I was in shutter priority, and I would set the shutter speed to 1/2000. I'm sorry, I was in manual mode, and I would set the shutter to 1/2000 or 1/3000, and I would vary this depending on what I thought I could get away with, the lowest shutter speed I thought I could get away with. And then for shutter mode, autofocus, I changed this to all, and I turned on bird detect, and shutter mode I did sequential, silent, and metering I did center weighted, most likely raw only, SIS auto. I also had auto ISO. And then in the menu, sequential shooting settings, I dropped this down to 10. Silence settings, I made sure I had the beep on so that I could hear that it acquired focus initially. And then finally, I was not in CAF, I was just in continuous autofocus, not continuous autofocus with tracking, just CAF. I found this to be a little bit better than, because once you have subject detect on, you don't really need tracking. And that's it. So that's what your screen should look like. That's what your super control panel would look like. So all target mode, continuous shutter, center weighted. And then I would just manually adjust the shutter speed and let the ISO adjust to whatever it needed to be. So that's what I did. Oh, green screen. Okay. Those are my birds in flight setting for now. That's what's been working for me, and I've been getting great results with. As my skill set improves, I may change that and tweak those settings a little bit, but that's where I'm at right now. And again, if you've just joined, I'm doing a Q&A for the OM-1 system right now. So if you have any questions, would you share your thoughts on whether or not auto IS should be turned off while shooting with Olympus bodies from a tripod? If so, at what shutter speeds? I always leave auto IS on, whether I'm on a tripod or handheld, right? Obviously, handheld. And that's mainly because I'm not using a very sturdy tripod. Because in theory, what used to be was that when you're using image stabilization when you're on a tripod, sometimes the image stabilization will sense its own movement and try and compensate on itself. And that would drive it into this sort of jitter pattern that when you take a picture, your image is not going to be tack sharp because the image stabilization is acting against itself. It's sensing its own movement and trying to compensate for its own movement. And I think in older image stabilization systems, that was probably definitely the case. Now, I don't have any experience with that myself, but I've been using auto image stabilization on a tripod or handheld forever, and I've never noticed any difference. I would recommend image stabilization particularly be on when you're using very long focal lengths. I mean, if you're at 100 millimeters or longer, and I'm talking about micro four third millimeters, not equivalents. So if you're shooting with the 40 to 150 and you're at 100 millimeters or higher, definitely have image stabilization on. And if you get up to 300 and higher, you can get much higher. Below 100 millimeters, if you're on a stable tripod, you could probably get away with not using image stabilization. But I've never seen any issues with using image stabilization on a tripod when it's in auto. But in theory, that's what could happen is the image stabilization might sense either the lens is moving in the lens, if it has lens stabilization, which is only on the longer focal lengths anyway. And that's when I recommend you have it on. Or it's sensing the sensor itself moving and trying to overcompensate for that. But I don't think that's an issue now because the the cameras have their own built-in gyroscopes and motion sensors and stuff built into the camera that it knows when the camera's moving and can differentiate that from the sensor itself. So I would just leave it on until such point you start to notice a difference. Now I haven't tested for that specifically. I mean, I've tried it right in the field. I would turn it on, I would turn it off, and I would look at the images, and I didn't see any difference. But I haven't tested it extensively like I would, like I should scientifically in a way that says, okay, at this shutter speed, image stabilization on or off doesn't matter. At this shutter speed, image stabilization makes a difference. But I know image stabilization definitely makes a difference with the very long focal lengths because there's so much jitter and movement in a camera that you can't see unless you're really using very long focal lengths. And that's when definitely image stabilization should be on. And I would imagine at shutter speeds at a 1/2000th, 1/3000th, image stabilization is almost a non-issue. But that's something I haven't tested for either, to be honest. It's something I've thought about. I said, okay, let me try a shutter speed of 1/3000th and turn image stabilization on, turn it off, and see what kind of images I get. And this is handheld, not on a tripod. But the same thing would apply to tripod. Now, if someone in the one of the viewers here in the chat section have experience with this, please share it, with our friend here, uh, because I don't have any specific uh, I don't have any specific tested methodology to turning image stabilization on or off when it's on a tripod. Best practice for years and years has always been turn image stabilization off for the reasons I mentioned. But my practical experience and what I've seen and what I've been able to do, I've always left image stabilization on auto. And I haven't had any issues whether I'm on a tripod or not. Tripod use has definitely dwindled with the amazing stabilization we have. But there are times when you do want to use a tripod because a tripod will always give you the tack sharp image that you're looking for. So that's definitely something I'll test for. I think that would be a great video to see if I can have any issues. So I'm gonna have to do a little due diligence and research on what other people have done and see if I can duplicate either their success or failure with image stabilization and come up with a methodology that would apply best to the Olympus cameras. But those are my thoughts for now. For now, right? Yeah, David says it should be turned off, and David has a lot of experience, um, and it says it in the manual. So thank you. So they say in the manual to turn it off, but I would like to test that myself because I've never had any issues with it on. And another point here is that it slows down the AF, and I assume you mean image stabilization. It does slow down autofocus and shutter speed, but I would have to. I don't know if it's something I could actually measure, without very expensive equipment. And let's see. Oh, Caitlin got to run. Okay, thanks for coming in. That was probably a while ago. You're not here anymore, but thanks for coming in if you're watching this later. Uh, yeah, joining a camera club, definitely. As I've said many times, with David Crooks is our organizer for the local camera club. It's the best thing I've ever done personally. You get to meet a lot of new people, and You get to share your experiences and learn things. I mean, it's and see new places. There's so many places David Crooks and his group we've gone to. I've lived here all my life, and he's taken me places I've never been to before, just around the corner. Like I've never been to Metal Art Gardens before, and it's just around the corner from me. Not well, relatively speaking, it's right in my area. Um, and again, I'm doing a Q&A now, so anyone that may have joined or has a question, if I haven't answered the question yet, be sure to ask it again, because there's no way I'm going to find it if you asked the question a long time ago. Let's see. So that was about that. Let's see. So talking about skill set on Pro Capture, I hold the shutter halfway to buffer. When do I full press? That's what I don't get. Oh, okay. This I can answer. So you're half pressing the shutter. It really depends on your settings. Okay. What I recommend for Pro Capture, let me just pull up a screen, and this will apply to, not this one, this one. All right, this will apply to really any camera that has Pro Capture ability, EM1 Mark II, EM1 Mark III, OM-1. So Pro Capture is where? It's in the sequential shoot. I have it customized to my menu. So Pro Capture, it depends what you're trying to accomplish, right? Let's do regular Pro Capture. And we have a maximum frame per second that we can set. And this is going to be subjective to what you're trying to capture. Pre-frame buffers. And you can do a maximum of 70 frames. So let's talk about this, what's happening. So when you half press the shutter, the camera, within less than a second of you half pressing the shutter, is going to capture 70 frames continuously. And it's going to throw out the oldest frame and keep the newest one. For that whole time that you're half pressing the shutter button, you're going to have 70 images. Now, the next number there, 20 frames per second. If you divide 70 by 20, you get 3.3, right? So basically you're capturing about 3 seconds of action before you fully push the shutter button. And this to me is a little bit too aggressive, in my opinion. I'm going to change this setting here to, well, I meant to do 20. 20. And I'm going to turn off the frame count limiter because I can let go of the shutter button myself when I want it to stop. So let's talk about that for a second. So I'm at 20 on Pro Capture. So what's happening now is when you have pressed the shutter button, it's capturing 1 second of pictures. And then when you fully press the shutter button, that's when it'll start to capture all of the image from that point forward for as long as you hold the shutter button down with the frame count limiter off. And at 20 frames per second, I think the EM1 Mark II, Mark III, and the OM-1 will have no problem keeping up at 20 frames per second based on the buffering that I talked about in my last video. The reason I set it for 2020, I try to even it out, is for consistency and also for practicality. So let's say I'm trying to capture a bird just before it leaps off a branch or a tree, right? Just before it leaps off that branch, I want to capture that moment where he is opening his wings and the legs are just lifting off, or I'm trying to capture him just before he lands on the branch, right? So I can track and follow a bird for about 1 second. And I'll give you an example. Let me see. Like this image here, I use Pro Capture. So this bird was sitting on this branch right over here, if I recall correctly. And so what I did is once I locked focus, I have pressed the shutter button and I held it down. So I know that for 1 second, I captured 1 second of information the whole time I'm holding that shutter button down. And as soon as I see him leap off that branch to fly, I fully press the shutter button and I'm capturing 20 frames per second from that point. And then all I have to do is choose the image that I thought was best. So I wonder if I kept that image. Let's see. It's not there. Yeah, here. I believe this is the sequence. Oh, I might have already. Oh, I've already curated this. I only have 174 images here. I've already deleted everything else. Ugh. This is another frame. Shoot, I deleted the actual image I used. But anyhow, I wanted to show you the sequence of images from when I was half pressing the shutter button to when I push the shutter button. And you can see the sequence of when the bird is sitting in the tree. And then, so it's kind of like going back in time for 1 second. Because I can usually, as soon as I see the bird move, I can usually push the shutter button within 1 second of that bird taking off that limb. So now I know I've captured a full second before he leaped off the branch to everything after that. So I hope that makes sense. I wish I could have showed you that. I've already curated these images though. Oh, because you can see a folder can be like 3,000, 10,000 images when you're using Pro Capture and high-speed shutter and all of that. But that's what Pro Capture does. Is kind of like going back in time from the point you push the shutter button. Because what we had to do before is we had to be anticipate a little bit more and be very fast on the trigger to capture the split second that bird flies off of the branch. But with Pro Capture, we don't have to be quite as quick. We just have to have about a precision of 1 second. But the way I showed you in the settings, by dividing the frames per second times how many frames you capture, you can figure out how many seconds before that bird takes off that you're going to have saved in the camera. So I think the setting of 70-20 is too aggressive. I don't need 3 seconds to push a shutter button when I see a bird take off. I just need about 1 second. So I half press the shutter button. I'm waiting for the bird to take off. And as soon as I see him take off, I push the shutter button. And I know I've captured the 1 second moment before he took off and everything thereafter, all at 20 frames per second. And then you can kind of extrapolate from that methodology to the other Pro Capture methods that are available that are higher speed and etc. So I hope that makes sense, Marcia. Yeah. So you keep holding the shutter button until you anticipate the action, but make sure you set your Pro Capture settings correctly, because if you set it to 70 frames in buffering and only 20 frames per second, what's going to happen is you captured 70 frames, but your buffer is going to be almost full by the time you push the shutter button. And you might miss those sequences of that bird taking off and flying away because your buffer's full and the camera has slowed down. So you have to set your limits properly in Pro Capture so that you have some flexibility. And this is going to be in one of my videos about fine-tuning your settings in the camera. And Pro Capture, you really have to fine-tune it, and you have to understand what the buffers are in your camera. So in the OM-1, I know it's a 93 frame buffer. So if you're half pressing the shutter button and you're pre-buffering 70 frames, when you push that shutter button, you might get 1 or 2 more frames out, and then your camera's going to start to buffer and you're going to miss all the shots. So set your Pro Capture settings, that makes sense, but that's kind of the methodology I use when I'm setting my Pro Capture. And let's see. That was Chris Marsh's question. Stephen Long is asking, does anyone use K&F Concept tripods? I really like their filters, their mid-range filters, not their low-end cheap stuff, but they have a mid-range set of filters. Their tripods, I can tell you, I saw a video, somebody reviewing a tripod long-term, and the problem he was having was with the twist locks and where the ball head mounts, there's another twist there. Those disintegrated on him over time. So they're great if you're not going to use them a lot, right? They're just, you take them out occasionally. They're very good tripods, very steady, a lot of features, great price, but it's not a high-end quality tripod that you're going to have for 10 years and take a lot of abuse. And I'm talking about sort of their mid-range, low-end tripods. I don't know if they make high-end or not. But and this is true for really any kind of equipment, is there's pro grade high-end type tripods with all kinds of different features, and then there's sort of the entry level tripods that people buy, like from Sunpack at Best Buy. And these things, they work fine, they'll get the job done, but they don't have that kind of durability and silkiness, smooth quality to them that you'll get from a high-end tripod. And, for example, I have a very high-end Manfrotto tripod that I bought used from David that is still rock solid and will last probably another 10 or 20 years. But it's like $300, $400 just for the set of legs without the ball head, right? And so I'll buy a used professional grade tripod without any hesitation. But if you're going to buy a brand new tripod and you want to save some money, I prefer personally the Mi Photo brand that I use. Gosh, it's outside. Let me just show you the one I use the most. This is the one that I use the most when I want a sturdy tripod. It's not a heavy duty tripod, but this is the Mi Photo A1350. It's probably out of production, but they have a newer model. This thing is seen this. I've had this probably about 8 or 9 years now, and it still functions like the day I bought it. and I haven't had any issues with it. This was about 180 bucks, I think, when I bought it. So it's not a cheap tripod, but it's not the most expensive either. And it's been a good solid performer. Me Photo is a sub brand of another brand. Another brand that I really like is Benro. Benro makes some nice tripods, but they use a little bit more plastic in their tripods than this particular one, this Me Photo. This is pretty much a solid metal tripod. You know, inside the little twist locks are plastic parts, and those eventually are going to wear out. But the kind of plastics they choose and use in higher quality tripods are going to make a difference in the long term. You know, because plastic eventually is going to get brittle and break. You know, this is not going to last forever. So that's why, like my Manfrotto tripod, it has the clips that snap over versus the twist locks. The twist locks all have plastic in them inside. And over time, these plastics, they're just going to break. They're going to get brittle. Versus, you know, the ones that have the clips that clip over, you know, that's more of a friction pressure, you know, locking type mechanism that should last longer in theory. But the the trick is the entire lock is now plastic. It's usually not metal. So even then, those are going to break, but it's a different kind of plastic than they use inside, right? Uh, but yeah, I've had this one for about 8 years. The guy that did the K&F tripod review, he only had his tripod for about a year, but with heavy usage, and that's what happened to him. All right. If I use the double exposure mode on the OM, I did once. And you know, I actually, it's in one of my vlogs, come to think of it, when I went to Alexandria, it works fine. It works exactly the same as it has on all the other Olympus systems. But if you're not familiar with the Olympus double exposure, basically you take one picture and then it'll leave sort of an impression of the picture you just took so that you can frame up the second image, and then you take the second picture. So there's nothing new there, but it works. And I have a video on double exposure. If you watch that, it's virtually the same on the OM-1. Oh, Ben is here. Hi, how are you, Ben? I've been here for a while now. I'm so far behind on the chat, but I think, you know, uh I don't know if we can order remote yet. I got the I asked for some feedback before about, you know, should I do these long form answers where I just kind of jibber jabber for as long as it takes for me to, I think, sufficiently explain a question. And the response I got was, yeah, take as much time as you need to answer a question thoroughly, rather than rushing through every single question in the stream. So that's why these streams are getting so long now. And I'm not covering as many questions. I'll try to get to them all, but yeah, I think it's important to explain my because a lot of the questions, the answers are very subjective. They're not cut and dry, right? It's like, you know, like pro capture, I can't just say explain it simply and say, well, you have pressed the shutter button, it pre-buffers so many shots, and then you hold it down just when you see something happen. And most likely, you know what I mean? I have to kind of explain, says, well, if you're going to use pro capture, this is how I do it, and this is why, right? Because uh, you don't need to capture 3 seconds ahead. You can probably capture 1 second, but then, you know, some problems that can arise, you can fill up the buffer if you have it set this, you know what I mean? You have to kind of go through all this, right? So that people understand my rationale, my subjective reasoning for doing the settings the way I do, because there's reasons you may want to set it up for 70 pre-buffered frames. I don't know, but those are the reasons I use and what needs to be done. I don't know what but the remote shutter will have the pre-buffering capability. I have a generic one. I have to try and see because I want to do some live comp type shots, and I'll need to use a remote shutter for that because I'm just a one-man operation. But it'd be a good opportunity to test some of the other shutter modes with it, with a generic, like a $30, $40 generic shutter, right? Have you sold any of your photos on iStock? Do you recommend it? I've never sold it, and stock photography is tough. Um, but I don't want to give you any business advice on stock photography because I don't have any experience in it. I've only watched other videos where people have gone into it and gotten out of it. But that's that person, right? There might be some people that are very successful. But stock photography, depending on where you submit your images, is extremely competitive and can be very critical with respect to the kind of images you submit. I mean, they cannot have a single defect in them because some of these stock agencies, they're going to have very high standards for what they accept into their portfolio for sale. But I don't know. I'm sorry. I wish I could give you some real world experience with doing stock photography, but I don't have any, so I will not go on about that. I'm sorry. Oh, Roman's walked in. Hi. Got your analog Pen F. That's cool. I remember an article which some engineers at Olympus said that gyros would detect the rotation of the Earth and that it might cause the image shift to drift. Yeah. That to me, I think was a marketing. Uh, there may be some truth to it, but to say that it's so sensitive, it's going to detect the motion of the Earth sounds more of a marketing way of putting things or technical limitations on things, but maybe. Okay. Ronnie says, "Hey Rob, question. One friend asked me if it's possible to do AFC block or lock on Olympus. I don't know. I don't know what that is, AFC block. If you're talking about zone focusing or setting an area that you want to focus on, yes, you can do that. And in some of the Olympus cameras, you can even customize your own focusing area. But I don't know what you mean by AFC block or lock, to be honest. If you're talking about maybe a focus trap, I don't think you can do that. But yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what that means. AFC block or lock. Oh, wow. This is really old. But the OM system manual says to turn it off. And we were talking about image stabilization. For Astro, definitely it's turned off. I think Ben at Narrowband Channel can those are extremely long exposures though, right? So yeah, you definitely turn it off for Astro. Jeff Painter, hi. Tobias, hello from Austria. I'm sorry. Do you use the 1.4 converter? I haven't gotten my lens yet. The little bit of testing I did when I borrowed it from Bill, the images look great. 1.4, so you get an effective what? 560 millimeter at f5.6. But I haven't used it enough to give you an opinion one way or the other. I'm quite happy without the teleconverter at this point. The images that I got and the images I got with the teleconverters, either the 1.4 or the 2x, at that point, the images I was taking, they were so far away that I couldn't really see any advantage to using the teleconverter, because there was just, when you shoot something that distant away, there's atmospheric distortion and things like that. But yeah, I am going to get a teleconverter. I probably get the 1.4, but I don't have any experience yet with it to give you my opinion. And then here's Lysippus has a reference to James Parker photography. So let me look that up. Let's see. James Parker photography. And let's do tripod. All right, so here's someone that's done a test, right? So I'll put this link in. So we'll definitely check that out. Let me just add it here. I'll check that out later. Thank you for that. Last day's taking off. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in. And I'm just trying to see if there's any other questions here in the chat that I can try to answer. Have I found a suitable mobile battery charging for the OM-1? I haven't found one made for it specifically. I've just been using my old one. This is just a generic one on the that I got on Amazon for the BLH1 battery. And I use this rubber band. It's just USB port here. This is a USB 2 or micro USB. It's not USB-C. So I've had this for a couple of years. But it's very small, you can see. And what I do is I put the battery in here like so. And as you can see, normally the battery would snap in inside like this. But it's too big. It doesn't quite fit. So I have to put it in so that the back is sticking out. But when it's sticking out, it doesn't hold in place, so the pins don't connect. But anyway, long story short is I just put the rubber bands real tight on here to hold the battery in the charger so it's up against the pins. And this has worked for me. And I've charged on this charger about 7 or 8 times now without any issues. The only thing I noticed is I feel like it doesn't quite get to 100% using this charger. It's like 99%. When I put when I take the battery off of this charger and put it in the camera, it says 100%, but it goes to 99% kind of very quickly. So I feel like it's not not charging it is charging at 99% and not 100%. Whereas I've noticed when I charge it in camera, it stays at 100% longer than when I charge it in here. So there's that. But that's what I do now, and it works. But once they come up with a generic charger for that fits that battery properly, I'll probably get one. And George Mooring, this is about the Pro Capture. If it's buffering 70 images, do we have access? Yes, it'll save those 70 images to your memory card. So that's what I mean is you pre-buffer 70 images plus you take a few more, 20 more, you're going to have to wait probably 30 seconds to a minute before you're going to be able to really start taking pictures again. So that's why you have to kind of temper the buffering in the Pro Capture with the actual frames captured. So it's, so I've talked about that, but okay. There's no option to thumbnail burst. I think that's something on Panasonic maybe with their feature where you can kind of scroll through and pick one, I think. But yeah, there's nothing like a thumbnail burst type thing. And then David, I must have missed this question, but David's answered it. OM Workspace has the option to group sequence. So if the camera if OM's Workspace detects that you used a sequential shutter, it'll start counting off that sequence and group them together for you. I need to do some OM Workspace videos too, right? It's gonna have to wait till next week. I gotta finish my taxes. Oh my god. Normally I would take the rest of the day and either go out shooting and testing or make a video, but I gotta do taxes after I finish the stream today. Yeah, the clip locks, this is about the tripods. Some of them have the clip locks, some of them are twisties. The clip locks, yeah, you can, I'm always snagging my strap or something on it. Personally, I prefer the twist locks over the snap locks, but either way, you'll be fine. All right. I think I don't see any more questions here. Other than, have I tried customizing the focus area to your own liking? No. I know it can be done, but I'm content with a 3x3 or 5-point if I need to use a group. I've seen people customize, like they like to do the wide area, but maybe when I get more into wildlife photography, those kind of things will make sense, or sports action. But for now, just the grouping 3x3 or 5-point is enough. I don't need to get too fancy with the autofocus. I'm just not that good where I need to fine tune my autofocusing that much. If I get better, I will may consider it. the OM-1 RB01 rubber band charger. That's funny. Yeah, I can't talk about the 300 f4. I only had a couple of days of shooting with it. It was fantastic, but once I get my own copy and have some more field time, I'll talk about it more. And it says I group my sequences, but I am writing 30 to 50 images per group. So when I'm editing, it takes a long time while to go through to see which poses birds are in during sequence. See part 2. Okay. Why don't they have it animated when you hover a group? Yeah, that I think that was a Panasonic feature, but um, that would be kind of nice, but I don't know how. If you're talking about hovering over something, so to speak, like in camera, I don't see that would be practical in real time because you would be missing shots by chimping and looking for that perfect shot rather than going around and taking pictures. If you're talking about hovering and doing things while you're in the computer, that would be a nice feature to add, definitely, in post processing. But in camera, I don't see much need for it. Oh, you meant a power pack for charging on the go, not a charge. Oh, okay. I use the Anchor. Um, I have a video on the Anchor power bank that I use for the M1 Mark III. It works great for the new OM1 as well. It's it was right there. There it is. Gosh. So this I believe is a 20,000 milliamp. So I can theoretically charge a battery 10 times, an Olympus battery, maybe 8 or 9 times. Uh, but it has a USB-C out and 2 USB-A outs. And this is, I believe, a 60-watt capable charger. So you just have to have a PD, P as in Paul, D as in David. So a PD compatible charger, 60 watts uh, minimum, so that you can actually run the camera and charge it at the same time using one of these. And having 20,000 milliamps will ensure you have enough juice uh, to do that, just that, run the camera and charge the battery several times at once. So this is an Anchor brand. I don't think they make this particular one anymore. There might be a newer model. But I like the Anchor brand because this was actually the recommended, very specifically recommended by Olympus for the EM1 Mark III, and it works great with the OM1. God, the print is so small. It's called the Power Core Plus 26800. I'm sorry, this is a 45 watt. 45 watt, it says right here. I said 60 because it comes with a 60-watt adapter as well to charge this. So you can charge this, with a generic charger, but it comes with its own 60-watt charger. And this is a 45-watt output. And you can use the cable that comes with the camera, but this also comes with its own capable charger. This is the wrong end. What do I do with the cable? Uh-oh, I froze here. Can you guys still hear me? All right, sorry about that. I don't know why that froze. Let's see. I know I have the right cable here. Yeah, this is a. It comes with. You have to have the correct cable too. All USB-C cables are not the same. Let me just plug it in. Oh, this cable's too big with this adapter. I just want to make sure that this does everything I said it does. All right, power on. Push and hold. All right, there, now it's on. So I have to push and hold the center button. And apparently I need to have a battery in the camera too. All right, so now it's charging the battery and it's using the power from the power bank to run the camera. So this power bank does it all. 45 watt PD compatible power bank. Any 45 watt PD power compatible bank should work to charge the camera, to charge the battery and run the camera at the same time. So like I said, I used the Anchor brand. I paid 110 bucks for this. It was a little pricey, but this is the one that was officially recommended by Olympus for the OM-1 Mark III, and it works great with the OM-1. Okay. 1 second. Okay, I see you, Ben. Give me a second here. Uh-oh. Is there no sound? I'm showing sound on the screen here. Please tell me if there's sound right now, because Ben wants to come on. And all my meters are running. Like all my audio meters are bouncing. Distance sound. Oh, so maybe it's the wrong mic. Let me see. No, that should be the right. Ah. How about? All right, that should be right. Okay, that should be the right sound. Sorry about that. I hope I'll just give you a short story. PD compatible 45 watt power bank, 20,000 milliamps or higher, and you need to make sure you have the right USB-C cable. You can always tell because they have an extra long stem on the cable. This has the circuitry inside so that it communicates properly with the camera, but that will charge the battery and run the camera at the same time. But 20,000 milliamps would be enough to run the camera probably for 24 hours and charge your battery several times. All right. Ben, sorry. Are you
Can you hear
ready?
me okay?
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, you were. It sounded like you're using the laptop's microphone or something there for a little while.
Yeah, it must have switched on me when I lost the
Yeah.
camera feed.
Well, I
Because the
got about
camera.
20 minutes lunch break here, so
Oh,
I jump
okay.
in.
Anyway, welcome everyone. This is Ben from the Narrowband channel. He is a uh, astrophotographer and uses Olympus gear and has more Olympus cameras than I do actually, and has been shooting longer than I have. and he's been a guest on our channel a few times, and definitely has a lot of technical background when it comes to the technology in the cameras, like specifically the sensor technology, and a lot of insight in the performance of the sensor in technical terms and how that translate into real world photography, particularly with astrophotography, because astrophotography stresses, really pushes, I wouldn't say stress, but pushes a camera to its limits in every way possible.
Yeah.
And that's why he has such a deep understanding of it, because he has to, for the kind of photography that he specializes in. And but anyway, so what brings you to the channel today? I do have a link down below. uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
I always
Anybody can
put a link
join,
down
man.
below for people to just join in if they want to. I forget to mention it at the beginning, but anyway, what's going on, Ben? What brings you on today?
Oh, I have mine, and actually last night we were at church, which is kind of like a music concert, and I got to use Pro Capture for the first time with this guy, and I must say it's a lot. I think it's a lot. I could learn how to use it a lot faster than using and going out and doing nature photography because like I don't know what it is like when you're doing nature photography, the moments where you can like try to image something are very short usually. Like you've got to be ready and then have your camera
Mhm.
set up properly. Whereas like at church, like we were last night, like I had 45 minutes straight where I could take a picture, mess with the camera, hope that setting's not working, you know, and until I got it fine tuned and kind of figured out what settings worked for that situation. So that's just kind of my experience with like and with Pro Capture. So what I found was that with a concert, you want to use like a slower frame rate. You don't need the 50 frames per second that you might need with like birds in flight. Okay. And also, I didn't need as many frames buffered before and afterwards. But it was really cool to like capture stuff that like in years past, like okay, I used to do photography for a college. Okay, like I was a teacher there for 2 years, and I photographed everything, the speakers, the music, everything. And we always would try to get these specific poses of speakers or of musicians and whatnot. And
Mhm.
nailing that shot was so hard. It was, and the staff was very picky about the photos. With Pro Capture, it's just like, boom, okay, I got it. Boom, okay, I've got it. It's just like one after
Yeah,
another. It's absolutely amazing, this Pro
yeah.
Capture thing.
And
Um,
that just made me think that that might be a scenario where you want a 3 second buffer of
yeah, a
images,
little bit longer
because
buffer.
yeah, with people, because they, like a band, 1 second may not be enough time and you miss the shot. So three
Hmm.
seconds you captured it.
Yeah, I was also amazed at the amount of light in there, even though it's like pretty dark. Like
Hmm.
this guy here, I was at 1600 ISO, and that was plenty.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
1600's no problem.
yeah. I was actually, I
Definitely.
think I was using like 500th of a second or something like that.
Hmm.
But so you were talking about battery chargers, and I know like with the EM1X and also the EM1 Mark III, those cameras were really finicky as to which battery pack you use. Like you said, it had to be a very specific voltage and amperage and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But with the OM1 so far, I haven't found a single battery pack that doesn't work with this guy. And
Interesting.
I've even been able to use my cell phone charger for my phone, or excuse me, my iPad, which is a USB-C Apple charger, and that will even charge this guy.
Okay. Well, I got a dummy power bank here.
Yeah. But one thing I was disappointed in though is that so with the older cameras, if I was using the DC plug right here, which is that round
Hmm.
port, I could run the camera without any batteries in it whatsoever. Right now, I haven't yet figured out a way to run this camera without at least one battery in it. I got to have at least one battery in it, even if I'm
Yeah.
plugged into the USB, and that's technically powering and charging the camera. I haven't been able to find a way to to work around the limitation of you got to have at least one battery in there. There's probably a setting somewhere or a configuration that I haven't figured out yet.
Yeah. Well, I just plugged in this dummy battery pack,
Mm-hmm.
and it is running the camera off the
But it's not
battery
charging?
pack, but I don't see it charging the battery at the same
Okay.
time. So this may be a way, because I think you need to explain why running the camera without a battery in it is important to you.
Oh, well, the heat for one thing. Also weight, like on the little trackers that we use, like the lighter you can get the equipment, the better. And also, like a battery as it's discharged, it warms up, and so it'll warm
Yeah.
up the camera as well. So that's the reason why I try to run stuff without any batteries whatsoever.
Right. And heat is detrimental to astrophotography, long
Yeah,
exposures.
every degree above 20 degrees Celsius, thermal noise doubles. Every single degree. So if you're working at your camera's 30 degrees Celsius, you've got 10 times as much, even more noise than somebody who's got a camera that's running at 20 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
And
And
20
you
degrees
said that,
Celsius is about room temperature.
right. Right. And that's I just thought that needed some explaining, because people are like,
Mhm.
why would you run a camera without a battery? But it seems like if you
Oh.
use a dummy charger, I mean, this is the battery pack for my heated vest.
Mhm. Did you try it
So,
with the camera off? Does the battery light come
oh
on
yeah, if
then?
I turn the camera off, the battery light comes on.
Mm. I bet not
Also,
enough amperage to both run it
to
and
do it
charge.
both, yeah. I
So
wonder if I take the battery out while it's on, what happens? I'll probably break it. Oh yeah, it shuts off.
yeah,
And then as soon as I put the battery in,
you probably got to restart it. But oh yeah, there you
yeah,
go.
it comes on. Okay.
Yeah,
Anyhow, so yeah,
yeah.
that's interesting.
I have been collecting a few images here and there, but oh man, this spring is just a horrible time to be an astrophotographer. Every time it says it's going to be clear, I go out there and it's completely overcast. Every single time it says it's raining right now, I go out there and there isn't a cloud in the sky. It's just
Right.
really, really frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, it just every time April comes around, I always remember the saying, April showers, May flowers.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
it's
like
just
I got this guy right at a new moon. I was like, oh yes, I can go out and get some images. Nope.
yeah. Yeah. But
Oh.
you'll have fun with it eventually. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it really is an amazing camera. I'm so happy with it. Have you had any issues though, like I talked about in the beginning? Or
Uh,
maybe you didn't hear about it. Just tell me if you had any issues.
I missed the first 30 minutes of your thing
Yeah.
today, but uh, I'm just getting used to the menus, getting used to
Hmm.
settings. I know, like, I was out trying to photograph a rabbit in our backyard because we have a female. She's building a burrow, obviously. She's carrying stuff around in her mouth. And I was, like, trying to take pictures with Pro Capture. My images were underexposed. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And it wasn't until I was at church that I figured out that, oh, yes, if you've got the frame rate set really high in Pro Capture, the
Hmm.
slowest shutter speed you can use will be capped off at a certain point. So
Oh, that's right.
if you
Yes.
if you're doing 30 frames per second, you can go only down to 30th. If you're
Right.
doing 50 frames per second, I think the limit's actually like 600th of a second or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, it
That's,
jumps. It jumps when you
yeah,
change
it
shutter
jumps up really
modes.
high,
Yeah.
and I would be curious to know as to why that is. Maybe that's gaps between each image that the sensor needs. As I don't know, as it's reading the image off the sensor. Uh, like I
Yeah.
said, I've got so
Well,
much testing to do with this thing yet, and
yeah, I know. And if you want to, I'm talking to the viewers here. Definitely check out Ben's channel if you want to really deep dive into technical issues or technical reasons for why. Well, let me rephrase that. The technical reasons or the technology behind the features. That's what I should say. The
mm,
technology behind the features in the camera. Ben does a really good job with that. And let me just see if there's a quick question here. Uh, what if you want to photograph a drummer? Their arms move pretty fast. The problem is they're always in the back.
ah, sometimes that motion blur of their hands, that's not a bad thing. But I'll tell you what, like our drummer is behind plexiglass, so that kind of sucks for taking photos of the drummer.
Huh.
But I don't know, man. I had no problem getting over 600th of a second exposure time. I mean,
Right.
I would think that would be plenty fast enough. And also like with pro capturing, you could capture that moment where maybe because like sometimes when the drummers come down, they'll pause at the top with their whatever those things are called, the wood sticks.
Hmm.
And that right there might be a good point, if you want a sharp image and everything. I know a lot of times those the drummers are kind of in the shadows too. Like they don't typically put a spotlight on the drummers.
Mm.
So that's kind of something you could just like maybe ask the lighting crew, like, hey, do you have a spotlight you can put on that guy? Because a lot of times like they have the ability to control all the lights in there,
Yeah.
and this is a funny thing. So like it never fails. If I have a battery grip on my camera, two things always happen. Number one, security always asks me who I am. And number two, like it seems like people always bend over backwards to kind of like accommodate what I'm doing, which is nice.
Yeah. Okay. And then
Yeah, I'm
I
kind of hearing a little bit of static in the background of my.
no, it's probably my computer fan.
Really? Okay.
It's pushing. I guess I could. Well, if I touch it, I don't want to freeze anything up.
Yeah, mine's actually running kind of hard right now because I have a
Yeah.
bunch of pictures in Photoshop.
Uh.
So yeah, and today like I basically had to like my work laptop. I haven't been able to update the thing in a year, so I don't have the new Adobe RAW codec on there, and so I couldn't open my OM-1 pictures that I took yesterday for work at
mm,
a gift shop that we did. So today I'm working on my own laptop while I'm completely rebooting
yes.
I'm sorry, I'm completely rebuilding my work laptop while I work on my personal laptop today.
Right. Right. There's a question about the weather sealing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I can answer this. About salt water. But would you trust? Okay, so I know weather sealing rating is very impressive with the OM-1, but would you trust it against saltwater exposure? I would love to confidently partially submerge my pro lens. Wow.
If you dunked
I,
it really fast, no. Oh man, that's totally up to you. I saw once there was a guy, he did a submerged Olympus E1 test, and it didn't survive the test, which was kind of sad to see a camera die on video.
okay. Yeah, so don't
So
do it. I mean, that
yeah,
technically the
it's
rating, the IP53 rating of the new lenses and the new camera are
mhm.
not to be able to submerge the camera, but to resist, water coming in, like
Yeah.
rain
See,
and
like
things.
yeah, there's a huge difference between jets of water hitting your camera. Like I know people that have taken their Olympus E1s whitewater rafting, and like they get completely submerged for very short periods of time. But there's a huge difference between a very short period of time and actually being kind of like underwater.
Yeah.
And also there's a huge difference between, okay, this is water that, okay, we're in the water, but there's no pressure around you.
Hmm.
Whereas, because like that's kind of the situation, like you're getting hit with these waves and stuff that are coming up, but there's no pressure from all sides, versus like what actually involves putting the camera underwater.
Yeah.
And
That.
then there's a guy here with a star tracker question. So
Hmm.
the cheapest star tracker that I know of is the Omegon tracker. I think it's like $100, and it's
Hmm.
actually mechanical. That right there is a really good one if you just want to try. That's a good one to try out, and you can upgrade them too with like all sorts of little extras. But yeah, the
Yeah.
Omegon, I think it works off of like a kitchen timer, a mechanical kitchen timer.
Wow. Um, yeah, but let me just add one more thing I saw
Hmm.
about the weather sealing was Matt Granger had an Olympus camera, and I think he dipped the front of the, it was, I think it was a 40 to 150 lens, but he dipped the front of that in water and it got water inside the lens. So yeah, the camera's definitely not good in any kind of submersion situation. And it's not designed to be, but uh yeah,
Was that the 40 millimeter f1.8?
no, the 40 to 150 2.8 or the 300
Oh,
f4.
okay.
It was one of the longer lenses, but he got water inside of it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Here's another thing, like a lot of people forget this, is that like these rubber seals and gaskets over time they wear out and they also get dry. And
yeah.
we actually covered this when we had all of the Micro Four Thirds guys on together in a big chat, I think, a little bit
Hmm.
with Joe Edelman, Jimmy Chan, and Robin Wong, and
Yeah. Yeah.
you were there, of course, I was there. But yeah, like rubber seals dry out with time. Like if you run your AC really hard in the summertime, like that dries rubber out so fast.
Mm.
Um,
Wow.
so yeah,
Makes me
rubber
wonder
seal.
about putting my cameras in a dry cabinet.
Yeah, a lot of guys do that, and
Yeah.
just to like keep like a consistent level of humidity, because not enough humidity, is detrimental to a lot of things. Like,
Hmm.
and for example, at church I went to as a teenager, we had an organ from it was 250 years old, and we had a guy come and look at it, and he said, the simple fact that you guys do not have AC in this building is the reason why this organ still works, because otherwise everything in it would just all the rubber, all the leather would just dry out and just fall apart. And that's what
Yeah.
happens in so many churches with have old pipe organs. The all the bellows and everything just falls to pieces, and then you can't keep an airlock or anything like that. And
Yeah.
it's the same thing with all these rubber gaskets and stuff. And I know, like, I could check my E1s, like the gaskets on them, they actually still look pretty good, but that's because I don't keep them in an air conditioned environment. I actually stored them in a section of my attic that's not air conditioned. And it gets
Mm.
warm up there in the summertime and freezing up there in the winter, but the gaskets are still in pretty good shape, at least visually.
Interesting.
So,
I mean, there's also, design elements, not gasket related, about preventing the water ingressing into the different creases and crevices in the camera, right?
yeah. Hmm.
So when water hits the camera, they design the shape and texture of the see of the points anywhere that is external on the camera, so that the water kind of sheds away from that point instead of ingressing into it. And then once it gets in, the seals have to take over. But there is some design thought into the button, excuse me, the buttons and dials,
Hmm.
so that when water hits it, it tends to shed away from that point of ingress versus towards it.
Yeah. Well, here, one more thing that I got to because my lunch breaks up. So what do you think of the ergonomics so far, Rob? Like how it feels in your hands stuff.
It feels about 90% the same as the EM1 Mark III, which I really love. But I got used to this. The EM1 Mark III is just a hair smaller and fits my hands a
Hmm.
little bit better. This one feels bigger in my hands, so I'm not quite used to it yet. Uh, so for me, right, the two buttons in the front, I'm having a harder time reaching these two buttons in the front because I have very
Hmm.
short fingers. So this bigger grip for me is actually not as comfortable as the
I've had
EM1.
that trouble with the EM1X actually. Like there have been times
Mhm.
when I was doing macro stuff, couldn't reach those buttons. I had to like
Yeah,
because I was on the ground. I had to completely alter my posture in order to get to them.
right.
But so I took my OM1 into my local dealer. He's a Canon guy, and he loved the feel of my EM1X. He just loved it.
Yeah, yeah.
But he
So
said,
it's always important. You have to try the camera and see how it
mhm,
feels and fits in your
yeah.
hand.
And
So for
I'm
me,
really
like
liking it. I really like
I
the
like this
OM1.
little rubber. You pointed out a lot of things in your video.
Mhm.
I like the grip, rubber grip here on the back of the battery door, and
The
the
only thing I don't like is the info button and the playback button are really hard to find in the dark.
Oh,
And I use them quite
yeah,
a bit. I mean, you
because they're
gotta
very flush now.
they are very hard to find.
Yeah,
Uh, so I guess I just have to hope for an OM-1X.
yeah. I would have preferred the menu button to be on this side too.
I kind
And
of like that, except for one thing. Okay, I love having the menu button over here because I can use two hands to manipulate
yeah,
everything. But when you flip the mirror out, oh, getting to it's a nightmare. It's a pain in the butt.
yeah, yeah. This
So,
like I think on the Nikon they put the trash button here and the
mhm.
menu button over here. I prefer that configuration better.
Yeah, the
Make this.
EM1X, it's down here,
Hmm.
and this is the perfect location for it, really. And it's like I
Well,
said, everything about the EM1X is really hard to beat.
yeah. Well, we'll agree to disagree. I think it should be right here with your thumb because I want to push the menu button and immediately go into the menu with the jog dial
Mm-hmm.
like this, one hand operation. But now it's always a two-hand operation
Yes.
when I
Yeah.
push the menu button.
Like
And
it's faster, but it is less convenient. Sometimes like
yeah,
depending on what angle you're at.
and I did like your point about the concave or is it convex
Mm-hmm.
buttons here on this side. It was kind of an interesting design choice, but now the way you described it is you can push forward and push backwards, and you have a positive feedback
Yes.
that you've pushed the right button versus when
Mm-hmm.
it was concave. You know, I think of it as innie and outie, like belly buttons. When it was an outie, you didn't have quite the same positive feedback, right? You had to be sure that your finger was on the right side of the button. Whereas with this one, you just have to kind of push forward or push backwards, and you definitely
Mm-hmm.
have the right button.
Yeah, because
So
I've hit the wrong button with the older camera many
yeah,
times.
so that's an
So
interesting design element that I overlooked because I couldn't. I mean, there had to be a reason, but now I
mhm.
understand better from what you said in your video. Being able to pull back or push forward with your finger versus trying to find the right button, you know. But anyhow, just minor things, right?
Yeah, I hate the little stuff, so it's important. Well, here I gotta go because I'm done
Okay.
with my lunch break.
Thanks for coming in, Ben.
No
Always good to
problem.
see you.
You too, man. Bye.
Bye bye. Okay. Any good? Oh, I don't have any good cases. I hear Pelican is very good, Pelican brand, but that's all I can recommend. Pelican is a high-end hard case type uh, thing, but I'm sorry. Let me read the question one more. I use the camera a lot at construction sites and looking for a good, strong, small case for strong storing cam and lens. Any favorite? Yeah, Pelican brand is very popular. So all I can recommend, but I don't have any experience with it personally. And Mr. Tomato, oh, I'll have to watch that. Talking about the aspects of the OM1. Okay. And Plato's leaving. They have released volume 1 of 3. They mentioned changes in plastics to lower weight. Okay, this is more about the interview. So I'll definitely have to watch that. So I'm going to go. Thanks, everybody, for coming in today. Thanks again to Ben. And I'll be back on Sunday. No special guest this week. It'll just be me again. But as always, you guys can join in. I always put a link down below if you want to join me in the chat or on screen. You're always welcome to do that. But hopefully, I answered some of your questions and gave you my thoughts on the OM1, which are very always sincere and honest opinion. How I feel about the camera, which is I really love it, and I think you will too. And I will have videos in the future helping you to learn to use the camera, learn to get the most out of the camera, and enjoy this craft that we call photography. So you guys have a great weekend. We'll see you again soon.